My name's Aindrea Emelife. I am the curator of modern and contemporary at MOWAA. I hope you guys have had a really great day so far and enjoyed the previous proceedings yesterday. But this talk is one for the artists. At MOWAA, our primary audience, the audience that we seek to serve, is at the end of the day the artists, especially the artists of tomorrow. And so it was really special to be able to convene this talk with a diverse array of different artists that approach a number of different ideas, themes, and discourses in their work. So we are joined by Cameron Ugbodu, who's on my left, Olukemi Lijadu, and further on, and Etinosa Yvonne. I actually will start by letting them introduce themselves because I get a bit of a pet peeve when I see artists truncated sometimes, and I think that agency is really important. So, in a very short summary, because we have a lot of interesting things to go through, if you could discuss your practice, how you came to making the art that you do. Cameron first. It's already on.
Hello. Hello, my name is Cameron Ugbodu. I'm a multidisciplinary artist. Like, I work with different mediums. Like, I started out with photography, but now my mediums include painting, like sculpture, woodworks, metal work, and I all combine them in like art pieces. And I kind of started making work because like I had difficulty expressing myself like verbally. So like I guess using different mediums to like create the images or things I wanted to say just came like natural to me. And then, yeah, I just made that my practice and um, my artistic journey started through that.
Hello. Hello. Okay. My name is Olukemi Lijadu and I'm from Lagos. I am a multidisciplinary artist. My academic background is in philosophy. And I started making art, or I was drawn to the camera, the video camera to be specific, when I was a teenager. And I was sent to boarding school in the UK away from my grandparents. And I used the video camera as a way to archive and document the stories of my grandparents. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that this was like a particular form of magic. The fact that I could capture these images and their voices, and perhaps my children and their children's children's would be able to learn a little bit about who they are through hearing directly from their ancestors. So my practice is all around conserving memory, and how music does this across the Atlantic. Because I'm always thinking about not just Nigerian heritage, but how that shows up in Brazil, the Caribbean, North America. So yes, I make films and installations and music. Also, I'm a DJ. Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Etinosa Yvonne. I am a documentary photographer and visual artist. I'm from Edo State, and then I'm also based in Abuja.
And so I kind of wanted to start with maybe a little bit of a controversial question, mostly because I've observed this question being asked by artists often. I'm sure everyone is aware that the art world tries to create these categories. If you're emerging, or if you're established, if you're a young master, an old master. And I think at once, I think it's a little bit complicated because what does emerging mean? Is it to do with age, or it's a part of your career? Like, what is the cultural signifier? So, if I were to say to all three of you that you are approaching a stage in your careers where you might be seen as established, what would you say to that? What does the idea of the weight of being established, or trying to rise up a certain hierarchy mean to you? Or do you not think about it at all? Anyone can start. So maybe.
Okay. Right now, I'm like in the point of my career where like I feel like I thought about these things like in more of my beginning of my career, and like I realized this like attaching these labels to myself did not really help me, like especially mentally, because like it gives quite a lot of like pressure. Like if you're like always see like emerging, and like at some point you're thinking, oh, what do I have to do to like become established? Also like in like who gets to decide like if you like established or not, like and like I was and now that like when I saw like the core for like this panel, I was like, oh, it's like for like now being established artists. I was quite surprised because like I didn't think about that, and that like kind of brought this whole thinking up again. But like I don't know, I'm still trying to detach myself like from these labels, because like there's no real like a universal rule to like be like if you do this and this and this you're established. So it's quite like a subjective thing, like to put the label on someone, and like I'm just wondering who gets the choice to do that. So yeah.
Okay, so for me, I would say the way that I started photography was really about driving positive social change rather. Those were the things that informed my work. I don't have a professional background. I didn't go to school for it. I learned on YouTube. So my introduction to a lot of things have been very organic. So using words like whether it's emerging and all of these things and all labels I put on I don't actually go out to ask myself, what am I? Am I emerging? Am I established? It's not the focus of my work. It is where I am, where am I now? Where do I want to go to? Am I evolving? Those are the things I really pay attention to. And I think I started to come across these words the more that I would start to go for like, Biennale and exhibitions, then you get to hear this conversation. It wasn't something that I was familiar with because I pretty much started on my own, figuring things out. So I remember when we sent the question, I said, well, this is not something I think about. It's not what drives my practice. It's not what drives me to do the work I do. It's my work impactful? Are people understanding the things that I want them to understand? What are the conversations that I had after I've shown my work somewhere? Those are the things that drive my work. So whether I'm emerging or I'm established, it's lovely to know, but I don't think about it. I genuinely don't think about it.
I'd say it's really reaffirming to hear from both of you that you don't really identify with that term, because neither do I. I think, like, as an artist, it's my duty to serve my art and my community and to focus on the message or the conversations that the work is that I'm hoping to spark through my work. So I think the labels are a distraction, and I see my art practice as a journey that is like lifelong. And to say one is established suggests sort of like an endpoint, but I don't really think that you have an endpoint when it comes to a vocation, right? So, yeah.
I guess as you were all talking, I was thinking how that maybe affects or impacts the way that I also move as a curator, and what milestones one is supposed to achieve in order to be established or senior curator, etc. And I also have tried to stop thinking about that and try thinking about who is the audience or who is the community that I'm trying to impact. So when you were talking about community, I think it's really important, maybe as a different measure, to think about more of the more holistic barriers, or more holistic signifiers, to determine one's success or the achievement of one's method or mission for their work. Would you say that the community or serving a social practice interacts in the way that you make? Maybe Kemi, you can start.
Yeah, and I think that as like films, I guess video and film is my primary medium. And a film is like only half of it is like the image and the picture. The other half are like the conversations that are like sparked. Um, and I try to always make space for that in my installations. So when I showed my film Guardian Angel at the Tree House in Lagos, for example, there was like an adjacent library and people could like gather and converse and across ages. And I essentially was really interested in curating a space that could foster intergenerational conversations around like difficult topics like religion in Nigeria. And I think, yeah, there's no work if there's no audience. And yeah, it's critical to my practice. How about you?
Sorry, can I have the question again, please?
Or maybe specifically because I know some of the work that you're doing here, how important or how does impacting the community affect your work? So Cameron is actually about to start working with the Bronze Casting Guild in Benin, and I think perhaps you're maybe, I mean, you could tell me, are you looking to connect with another community or another mode of thinking in that way? How are you thinking about yourself as an artist and how it can inspire or catalyze a new sort of way of a community building?
Okay, well, I mean, like, in terms of, like, the bronze casting workshop that I'm gonna start specifically, like, I really, like, when it comes to, like, my work, I really love, like, craftsmanship. Like, I love being able to, like, utilize different mediums to make, have, like, a raw material and then make, like, a work out of it and be able to tell a story with, like, different materials. And, like, I guess because my family, like how my family is based here in Benin City, like bronze casting was always like something that like really like, I don't know, was quite significant to me, and like I wanted to learn more about it and like also be able to like maybe one day like be able to use that medium to like express myself through that as well, and like um use it like in my own way to like create work. And like I was thinking, because currently I'm based in London, and I was thinking maybe I can do like a bronze casting workshop there, but then I thought like that would not really feel right, like paying someone in London, like using their studio and like learning the skills there, if I could just like come back here and like invest like the same like amount of money and time like in the community here, and like kind of like pour back in instead of like taking like the skill that like um, they've shared like for generations and generations, and like kind of like learning somewhere else and not pouring back into that community, instead of like coming back here and learning here, like engaging like with the Bronze Casting Guild and like really knowing like the history behind it, and like also valuing like the craft and skill more. And yeah, it just feels right to like do it here than like going somewhere else and like learning it there. Yes.
Yeah, how do you measure impact? Can you measure it through your impact on community? How much is social practice impacting your work, and is that a measure of success for you?
Yeah, I think my work is now community driven. Last year, I worked on a project which I've been working on the project since 2018. And then I got a chance to do something I haven't done before. Normally, I would take my work, have your research. I work as a photographer. I take my research, my materials, and then you get to do exhibitions outside of Nigeria or maybe in Lagos. And then a lot of times, because I do tackle a lot of social issues, the people who you're doing the work for don't get to see what you've done. And so last year I had the opportunity to go back to the communities where I'd been working. And I think that had more impact. Just to give you a background, I have a project that looks at the impact of atrocities on the mental health of survivors. And one of the images has been on the screen. And the idea of the project, or the aim of the project, is to advocate for increased access to psychosocial support for the survivors. And over the years, I've gotten to show the work and speak about the work. And I've never really had any, to go back to these people who are impacted by these atrocities, to not just show them the work, but to be a part of the conversation about what I'm highlighting. And so in 2021, I started to work with people who had been accused of witchcraft. and the impact on their mental health, especially for those who are accused and those who have lost family members. And so I spent time in two states in Nigeria, in Cross River State and in Akwa Ibom State. And after my research, my field research, I put together different forms of materials, which, then I had exhibitions in the two states. And so it wasn't just a photography exhibition. We used different layers. So it was images, it was videos, it was sculptures, there was an installation, there was drama performances, there was radio talks, there was a town hall meeting, just the way we're seated here. The space where I had the installation, where the exhibition happened at the museum, became also a space of conversation. So bringing both the survivors, the victims, stakeholders, police officers, civil society organizations, even psychotherapists to come here and to have conversations. So people got first-hand experience to hear from real-life survivors. So, because sometimes when you're talking about especially sensitive subject matter, when people have not been directly impacted by certain things, they cannot really relate to it. But having people come, someone whose mom was killed or someone who has had that personal experience to speak about the work, it had more impact. And definitely one of the things that for me was the first time in years of my practice since, I would say since 2017, that I could say, I think I've achieved a level of success. Seeing the impact that happened, seeing the conversations that was had in the two states where we did the exhibition. We had people who said they want to form their own smaller groups to start their own advocacy. And that's the kind of impact I want to have, where it's just an art, you're doing art, but it's beyond art. The art that sparks conversation, the art that sparks dialogue, the art that makes people say, I want to be a part of this change. I remember I had a police officer say to me, I'd never really given this a thought. I used to, I believe in witchcraft, but I never thought that it had this serious impact. And then he started to reference Nollywood movies, that's the Nigerian movies, and say, they showcase all these type of things. What can you do about it? And then I turned the question to him. I said, I've done my part, and as an artist, I've brought all of you together. I've shown you this evidence. You are a police officer. What is your own part? And then I said, it's collective action. I cannot do it alone. I've passed the baton over to you. In your own space, you've heard of a story of a young boy who went to the police to report the fact that he was almost going to be killed. And the police officer asked him, a 13-year-old boy, to bring 10,000 naira for them to prosecute the people who want to kill him because he's accused. So you have your own part to do. So for me, the way that I also want to start to approach my work and I can measure the impact is the conversations that have been had, the feedback that I got. I had an installation in the space where we honor the lives of people who have been accused of witchcraft. So I got images from different families who were accused of witchcraft, people who were killed. And then I also put like a condolence register, like we do in Nigeria. When people die, they have a small note where you write. I didn't get to look at it last year because I was exhausted, I was overwhelmed. And then I looked at it this year. It just felt like a feedback for me. It made me feel like I need to continue to show this work, even if I haven't shown it since last year. But this is the type of impact. That's how I start to measure impact, this communal dialogue that happens. And it's something I'm so heavy on. Whenever I want to do a project now, like I want to start a new project next year, it's going to be, before I take it out, before I disseminate it, I'm going to go back to the community because it was collaborative. Every step that I took when I was having my exhibition, the people whom I worked with were involved in it. It wasn't just about me. It was them doing the radio talks. It was them who had the access to see the psychotherapy. So I also want to replicate that model of that community engagement where I'm not just taking from them, but I'm coming back and I'm making them to be involved. And it's not only for social injustice stories, for anything, whether I'm doing something on culture or religion or environment or fashion, whatever it is. Take it back to the people where I got the information from. We have conversations, they see it. I want them to be a part of the process of this, part of their history that I'm documenting, that I'm preserving.
Thank you. That's definitely a very powerful mission. And I think what I also got from that message is that the agency of the storyteller is incredibly important, but also where the story is being told. Which leads into my next question, which is based on storytelling. I think that each of you are telling stories in different ways through different mediums, and I wanted to ask how you view your role as a storyteller. Is it to preserve, or is it to reshape, as you were saying, or is it to challenge some of these narratives about Africa and African identity?
Okay.
You'd have to go in a row. You can go first, yeah.
So I mean, I think all of the things you said, preserve, reshape, challenge, those are the things that I do in my work. Preserve, document, challenge, depending on what I'm working on. That's what I feel like that is my role. If I'm working on a social injustice topic, I know that beyond showing what is happening, I would like for a policy to be effected. You know, for example, last year I worked with lawyers a lot in my work, so it wasn't just me as an artist. To strengthen what I was doing, I had to work with people who are in that field who have been doing the behind the scenes work. My role as a storyteller is preserving, it's documenting, it is challenging stereotypes that exist, especially for me as a Nigerian photographer. The early years of when I started my project, I know I'm quite young in my practice, but I remember when I would work with some of these foreign institutions and the type of things that they want. Initially, I would be fine with it, but the more that I started to learn, especially when you're having, conversations and seeing the kind of images that are being churned out about your people, and then I said, I cannot be this person to recreate this type of stereotypical images of Africa. I give you a good example. One time I was going to go to Mozambique for a project, and the editor shared with me a mood board of the kind of images they want. It just looked, it was really sad. They showed me an image of some people in Congo, and I said to her, I don't show this kind of images because for me, my model is, can I let my mom be seen like that? Can I let myself be seen like that? And you need to think about context. I wanted to mention this context of, for example, in northern Nigeria, it's extremely hot. It's not uncommon to see flies on the children or babies, right? Especially if they have like muco on their nose and the rest. And so if I want to photograph a child and I need to photograph maybe a portrait of a family, I would say to the mom, can you clean the child? Why? Because if I take the image of that child with the muco on the nose, the fly is already in the Western world seen as poverty. But they forget the context of the fact that we are going through harsh weather. So it's not uncommon to see flies around, even regardless of how clean your environment is. It's just a norm when you're in the north of Nigeria, whether in Yobe State, Adamawa State, you will see flies hover around you when there's extreme heat. And so one of the things I'm very intentional about when I'm doing my work is I don't want to add to those stereotypes that exist. No matter how beautiful an image is, I have some shots that I would take. I remember I was filing an image last month from an assignment I did, and it was a beautiful image. But then I saw a part of the person's dress had torn, and I knew that in the context of that image, it would add to it would look like this person is poor. And I know that's not it. I wear torn clothes sometimes if I'm in my house. It's not a big deal. But once it gets into the public spaces, it then becomes a big deal. It adds to that stereotype. So for me as a storyteller, I have so many duties beyond just preserving, beyond just changing politics. It's also my duty, and I hold that responsibility, even reshaping ethics. Sometimes I have had clashes with editors that say, oh, they want to do a story and all of that. And I ask the person, are you comfortable with this story? Because I understand that when these people come to you, they pressure you. But for me, it's like, my duty is to protect my people. My duty is I'm not going to lie about things. I'm not going to show what does not exist. But I'm also careful that I am not, because I tell people, I cannot determine how your image will be used when it goes out of, my camera, when I file it to the editor. So I have to be sure that you're comfortable with what I'm showing. So I have so many duties, I would say, as a storyteller.
Yeah, I think what you said is really interesting. I think often about the language that we use when it comes to cameras, because I don't take photographs. I work with archival photography and I work with a video camera, but still the language around the camera is very violent. Shoot, capture, it's all extractive. And as African artists, I take very seriously my duty to sort of do my part in correcting sort of like the epistemic injustice that Africans face like across disciplines. So not just in art and image making, but also in terms of our understanding of history, our understanding of philosophy, our contributions to a number of fields from the sciences to mathematics are all sort of undervalued. And I think, how can I, as a filmmaker, make work that resurrects, in a sense, sort of these stories that are often not acknowledged because, I mean, we live in a colonial world and Nigeria is deeply informed by, or like current state is deeply informed by our colonial past. Some people say it's colonialism is ever present still. But basically, I think it's a matter of life and death for me. I know that sounds very dramatic, but I don't think it's like a reasonable like career choice to choose to be an artist. You're an artist because you can't really do anything else, and you feel deeply compelled to do something that's a bit crazy, which is dedicate your life to expressing yourself. Um, it's a matter of life and death because stories inform how we live. Stories inform how we think of ourselves. You're telling yourself a story every day you wake up in the morning and get dressed. You have a story that you work here or you work there. And so I'm really curious about what's our story about who we are, you know? And I think I'm really interested in like grappling with that even within myself because, for example, even though I grew up in Lagos, I went to a British curriculum school and I learned, like, I remember we did one lesson on the Benin Empire. But aside from that, I was learning about Henry VIII. I was learning about Queen Boadicea, and all, which is totally crazy because there's no British person that will send themselves to a Nigerian school in England and learn only about Benin and Lagos. It doesn't make sense. So I'm really interested in the absurdity of like colonialism and how that's like warped our minds and not even from a higher place. I'm working through this within myself also, um, and like seeking out our history. And for example, somebody that I'm really interested in is Sophia Oluwole, and I make a lot of work around her and her work in philosophy. She was the first Nigerian woman to get a PhD in philosophy, and she looks at like Nigerian, but particularly like Yoruba thought and philosophy, and she makes a very interesting case for the importance of including it in our curriculums. So yeah, I mean, I could talk about this forever, but I feel very passionate about stories and acknowledging the stories of the past in order to be able to move forward. Yeah, and that's what I think my role is as an artist.
For me, like storytelling, like I feel like I always like use like different mediums like to tell stories, but like why I started like kind of showing them like outwardly instead of just like making like work for myself was like because like I grew up in Austria and there was no really like any images of like people of like African heritage like anywhere or like at least they've been like completely erased and like I always wondered or is there anyone else out there with the same experience as me or like anyone who can like relate to like my stories and my ideas. But I was also fearing that like if they like already like were able to like erase like the image of like all the people that lived like on this patch of earth, like I don't know, I don't think it would be like that hard for them to now also actually erase the people themselves as well. And because there is no like stories or images of them, like who would notice or like who would see. So I felt like it was like important for me to now like tell the stories of the people around me or like even my own story just to like showcase like okay I was here I was there so that way like it would not be like as easy to like diminish me or like erase me out of like the history because like there's like proof like in whatever medium like I used the like I was there so like yeah it just justified like my existence and the existence of the people around me and that were close to me. Yes.
That was very interesting to hear as well, Cameron, because I mean, I grew up in the UK, so very much had that experience, and it was actually art that was the place that I sought out to try and find out more about these stories that you were saying, Kemi, like trying to figure out where we have been, but also that connection to an African history I found quite profound through the eyes of the artist. And so I also wondered how you, yeah, whether you as artists also do that with other artists, whether you connect in your own circles, in different networks, whether it's residencies or more informally, to share stories. And is that important? And how important are those communities of intellectual exchange for you from other artists or writers or whoever it might be? Is anyone?
So, yes, definitely my conversations with colleagues over the years is one of the things that helped me in the way that I see it, putting things in perspectives. Community is very important. Um, and also passing on the knowledge I have gotten from my experiences to other people as I'm learning. I'm also sharing, and we're having like this exchange. It's one of the things that has strengthened me, and has also given me some sort of boldness because I grew up in Nigeria, and the reality of growing up in Nigeria, if you grow up in the Nigerian education, having been educated in Nigeria all my life, to an extent, the way that we are taught, we are raised, can be very intimidating. So when you enter a space, especially when I started to work with foreign journalists, the way that I would tolerate certain level of treatment was because you're just happy to get the job, and then over the years you realize that that's not how it's supposed to be. It's you're all colleagues. It doesn't matter where they're coming from actually, and then you're hearing things and things that you would not see from a certain perspective. When you start to have conversations with colleagues, you realize this is not how it should be. So for me, community is key, and exchange is important. Having that, the shared experiences, because no one lives in a box. Just yesterday, I was having a long conversation with also another photographer, just talking about our experiences as photojournalists and some of the challenges we still face, being that we're from the continent, the type of way that they will treat us, as opposed to if they were working with other foreign, photographers from over there. So, community is important. Learning and going for some of this, whether it's workshops like this, or event like this, rather, residencies, has also helped me in terms of the way I see my practice. In fact, I'll talk about how when I started my project, the one I'd mentioned earlier, I had some ideas for the project. And because, we're talking about where I live in Abuja, we don't have a very vibrant art scene. And some of the imaginations and ideas I'll have for the project, when you don't have anything to look up to, you think that these things are impossible. Then I went for a residency in Gasworks in London, and I started to do studio. In fact, I made sure that I think it was every Friday or so, I'll go to different, museums, galleries, whatever it is, just see what's on view. That opened up my imagination, and I realized I had been putting myself in a box. And also, some people who I'll share some of my ideas with would make me feel like, oh, that's not possible. But that's also because of their own level of exposure. So going for these, whether it's workshops or festival, whatever it is, it does have a way. It opens up your mind, opens up to you to show you that there's no impossibility that exists, because whatever it is you're thinking, someone has done it and done it better actually. So community and going for this type of cultural exchanges are key to the development of any artist, and it's something I prioritize as much as possible because they have shaped the way that I think some of the dreams or some of the ways that I'm approaching my work is because over the years I've been having these conversations and I'm seeing things from a different perspective. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I think community is critical as an artist because studio practice can be a very lonely sort of affair. We don't have like an office where you go in every day and there's like a bunch of people. Like as an artist, I wake up and I go to my studio, and then depending on my project, I interact with people. Um, but you don't have that day-to-day conversations. So cultivating an artistic community is really important. But it's actually, I feel like as African artists, we face a specific challenge in that majority or like a huge amount of funding as an artist and audience comes from abroad, right? So a lot of us are constantly interfacing and explaining our work to foreigners who can't really see us, right? And it's a bit of a energy suck. It's like a time suck. So it's so critical that we have people around us that can see our work, like each other. And that's why I'm really excited about institutions like MOWAA, residencies that are popping up, around the country, providing more space for us to be in dialogue with each other, not just always interfacing with the West, because there's so much energy that we waste when it comes to like explaining who we are to others, when there's actually so much to be done here and between ourselves. And I'm also thinking about the legacy of like famous artist collectives like Uche Okeke, and how like critical sort of thinking together has been for Nigerian artists, um, and carrying on that legacy. But yeah.
Yeah, I think like art, artist communities are like very important, like, cause like I feel like the industry is like built on like or encourages like to be quite like selfish or like individualistic, like in a way, and like it just feeds into that. So, like a lot of times, like even like sometimes like also that like you're not really like encouraged to like say like if things are not like going well, or like I don't know, like the art market is down or so, you're not really making any sales. But like everywhere, like people are just like promoting an image of like, oh, everything is going great and whatsoever. And if you don't really have like a community like who you can talk like in honesty to, like you would not know like what's going on. Like you will feel quite isolated. Like even though like a lot of people might be going through the same thing or having like the same ideas, like if you don't have like the community you can like openly talk to, like it's quite like a challenge to like figure that out on your own. And like I feel like yeah, like collectives and like groups like very great. But like even like that's why I'm like very excited about MOWAA, because it's like kind of to have like a like solid like unwavering solid stable like foundation or like institution where like you can kind of like rally around. Like obviously like different groups kind of like more specific themes like where they work through, but like to have like a institution like this where you can always like kind of like find like a focus point and like rally around it, and like the like will withstand the test of time, like it's very important, because like yeah, it's just like a solid rock that like um yeah, you can always like find a foundation on and like come back to.
Thank you. I didn't carve that question so it'd be a advert for MOA, but seeing as we are talking about MOA, I would love to know, like, you can be very honest because it is actually just a question I want to ask. What do you think institutions, maybe I'll rephrase it, what do you think institutions like MOA can do for artists in order to, foster this sense of community, but also, I guess, what are the gaps that you would like? Like, what are the things that would allow you to do some of the things that you've been discussing?
I think residencies, um, funded residencies. I think space,
Yeah.
space, connections, connecting with local artists, because I think in the art world there's this sort of dichotomy between craft and art, and we've managed to lump a lot of African people in the craft section and not actually acknowledge their work as artistry, So kind of fostering those connections would be really helpful. Yeah, and spaces to show work.
I think that first of all, I'm excited about MOA because I'm also from Edo State, and there's so much opportunities that they can provide for artists. Like you said, fully funded residencies, access to opportunities, different types of opportunities, whether it's funding opportunities, because that's the core of a lot of work that we do. We need funding opportunities, trainings, not to this the country, but there's so much. I feel like the more that you travel and you have conversations with people, you just realize that over the years, you just feel that we need trainings that can bring us up to the level that we should be in. So trainings for people, from different parts of Nigeria, whether MOA has a partnership with like University of Benin or whatever school that is offering fine art, or keep it open to people who want to learn. There needs to be more intentional effort towards education, because it's really down. If not that I have stayed over the years and always very intentional about updating my knowledge, learning as much as I can, reading scholarly articles just to keep myself aware. I would say there's a gap that needs to be filled, and I feel like an institution like MOWAA can do that for several artists that are coming up. And then in terms of networking, it's not just putting everybody together and expect it's if I mentioned this before and I'll say it again, that even if you show all of the big players in the art industry here and maybe bring some graduates from different parts of Nigeria that have studied fine art and put them, it might be hard to get them to engage with these people. It's also because of the way a lot of us are being trained. You understand that corporal punishment is a real thing in Nigeria. What does that do to your psyche? It does make you feel intimidated. So you enter this space and you can barely raise your hand to shake somebody because you feel like, these are the people up there. So this type of thing where there are conversations around, boosting their confidence in themselves, this basic trainings, it looks little, but it can go a long way in helping them to sell themselves, to market themselves. I've had to learn a lot because I used to I was a social media person and marketer before. So I've learned confidence because you have to go into the streets and market the product that, to people from different types of backgrounds. So I've learned some of these things because of the experience I've had. But then what can we do to get our people to have some sort of confidence in their work, to approach their work? Sometimes I do get invited to do trainings, workshops, and all of that. And you see that the foundation of a lot of people is shaky. Like the ideas are there. I was in RX and someone came to someone threw a question. I had a talk with someone else and they asked a question about how to put forth a portfolio to apply for RX. And thereafter, someone came to me and he talked about all the ideas he had. But just a simple thing like writing a project statement and all of this, it looks so little, but some people cannot do it. And maybe it's because they're not teaching them or they just don't know the know-how. But these very basic trainings would actually help people to make them better artists, to make them competable, because we have a vast amount of talents. Look at Uniben, look at University of Uyo. I was in Uyo last year and I saw the fine art department. And my heart was bleeding for them because sometimes you have conversations with them. The idea is there, they're brilliant, they're intelligent, but to be able to compose themselves and talk about little things, it's not there. So trainings like that will really help. And I think a lot of intentional activities, whether it's funding, I think funding is key too. Because, I am also in that part where over the years I've had to, I apply for grants, my work gets funded, but looking at opportunities, just doing this basic trainings will help a lot. Funding will help a lot. Fully funded residencies and making sure that MOWAA is also not, I say this with all respect, an elitist space where, because we see opportunities sometimes and it looks like it's the same people that are being recycled in some of these spaces. The same names are being, so not being that space where we're having the same set of people or people who have access to certain set of people get these opportunities. It would be good for it to be as much as possible a neutral space where there's respect and they keep their doors open to everyone regardless of your class, regardless of whether you're coming from Ekoma or you're coming from Igun Street.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of like what I think about like more what could do should be like has already been said, but like I don't know, I just see it like as like a crossroads and like center point for like knowledge and innovation and information exchange and like a cultural like exchange point and also like kind of like an archive of all these outcomes and like moments that are happening here and like yeah just also hopefully like lowering like the hurdle like throughout like different communities or different like walks of life to like being able to like access like opportunities because and like yeah even like by being placed here, I feel like that already does like so much. Cause like right now, there's like so many like art hubs like in the world, like and a lot of them like with like a lot of the resources that like I don't know, like in London or New York or like quite like unreachable places for like a lot of people with like a lot of talents. Like even just by this institution being here, that already like it's like a big step like towards like yeah opening the doors for like a lot more people, and like yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add one last thing that I think is so important and crucial, which is like documentation. So, how can you build a space where maybe after each resident like completes a residency, there's like some sort of publication, like photographs, films, like being intentional about telling the story, not just of the past, but of the now, so that we have that to build on. Because I think archiving is something that is a deep like challenge, and like maintaining archives is a huge issue in Nigeria. And things, historical things, are also happening now. So how can we make sure that from this point on, like we're giving a space to sort of uplift and elevate emerging, established African artists? Yeah.
That's a very good point. And I'm glad you raised that because I think a lot of well, all of the work is urgent. Unfortunately, there's lots to do. But one of the very urgent things that we would like to focus on is archives. And in particular, I've been thinking about some of the gaps, I guess, in maybe African or let's say Nigerian art history knowledge. Because as you're very right, there's a lot actually that is there. It's just not being kept well. And we're actually at a very interesting tipping point where I think actually a lot of work can be done to save from really, well, yeah, some irreparable loss. But with that in mind, because I obviously love geeking about these things and I'm vastly interested in a lot of these movements, how much do you look back to specific art movements in African art history, whether it's artists, I know you mentioned Uche Akeke, for example. Are you looking back in order for general interest, or is it a way to sort of fit yourself within a wider art history? Is it to provide context, or I mean, is it just purely for inspiration? Yeah, I'm very curious as to what that looking back aspect does for you as an education point, but also as a context builder or as a yeah inspiration activator.
I think looking back for me, like on a personal and emotional level, feels like a search for myself, or like to see reflections of myself in the people that I'm studying. So learning about Uche Okeke, reading the Artist Manifesto, thinking about the intentionality of like this sort of modernist art movement in a country like Nigeria makes me feel less alone as an artist, right? And also, I think remembering that I don't have to reinvent the wheel, actually. Like, I think people who aren't artists think that artists just pull things from the air and create it. But we're always referencing, we're always thinking through and with the work that's come before. I think of an event like Festac, for example. And I mean, that's particularly interesting to me because I'm thinking not just about Nigerian art, but also about how sort of our culture has been spread, like following the Atlantic slave trade, and or as a result of. And I'm thinking about the fact that, oh, there was actually a moment when like Black people or African descendant people from across the world all gathered. And we're thinking about art as a way in which to acknowledge and celebrate like our shared histories. So I think it's a duty. It's natural. It feels natural to me as an artist to look back, and I think we have a duty. We have a duty too. Yeah.
Okay, so it's like you said, it's a duty for artists to look back. Of course, the world did not start to exist 2 years ago, so you just have to look back to see where we're coming from, and that will make you appreciate, where we are now, where we're headed to. And for me, I always like to, for first off, whenever I have to look back, it's also a way to inspire myself. Sometimes when you're creating, I don't know, there are different things that happen that come with being a creative. So this would just propel you to keep going. I remember the first time I saw Solomon Alonge's work. I think it was the museum in Benin. He's a photographer, Benin Heritage. Then I saw it at the Smithsonian. And he just, at the time I kept thinking, at the time he was just taking pictures. But look at how it has become a very important part of Benin history now. We get to see the pictures and then the fact that they were able to meet some of the people he had photographed at the time. That just looking at that and examining it in my head makes me know that there is a purpose beyond for what I'm doing, beyond now that I'm alive, because it's not for now, it's for 100 years time if the world still exists. And so it's important to always look back and to also educate yourself on what has been done. No idea is new. There's nothing new. So what has been done before, and how can I add to this conversation that I want to explore, this subject matter I want to explore? What is the different thing that I want to say with this work, which has already been approached before? It's really important that artists always look back. For me, I always look at what has been done, whether number one for inspiration, generally always for inspiration, and then of course to see what has been done before. And that's if to an extent when I'm approaching new projects, it's now that I'm being a bit more intentional. I'm looking at what has been done before, and if I see that okay, this part has not been explored, I want to explore it and I want to do it in depthly so that someone else would also come and do something a bit more detailed, from take another context and do it a bit more detailed. So it's always good to reference history actually.
Yeah, I feel like it's very important to like look back and yeah, just to like trace or like also just value like the people like that came like before you and like the foundation they built and like the work they did like for you to be able to do what you're doing now. And like that's also like one of the reasons why I came here and wanted to do like this project with like the bronze casting girl, because like there's a lot of text about like yeah, like the bronzes, and like is a lot of them are quite like Eurocentric, and they talk about like up to the point like when they've been robbed, and like a lot of about like repatriation, but like the girl is still working, and like there's still history like like every day, every new day is like history that's happening, and like the people that are making the work, they're like kind of like living archives as well. Like they have their own stories to tell, and like yeah, like this is yeah, that's why it's so important for me to like come here and like yeah, ask those questions and like listen to their stories. Yeah.
I think of it like in musical terms as a DJ, like you're constantly remixing and like sampling as an artist. And even if you think about like Charlie Poppy, he samples a lot of like iconic Edo musicians like Pasande Edo, and like how do we like continue to like sample and remix in our work to think through the past? Yeah.
That's a very fun reference. I didn't know that. I think also, as you were talking, I was thinking about how some of these iconic African artists are now very overdue getting their dues. They're being shown increasingly in Western institutions, which is obviously great because we want the widest possible audience to understand. But have you noticed, or what are your feelings in both respects? Like, what is it like to show in Nigeria, or maybe in less specifically on the continent, versus in the West? How do you interact with an international gaze? Does that even impact you at all? I talk about that because I remember reading some words from Beno Momu, who obviously studied at Slade and was more became an art practiced a bit more in Nigeria, but he talked very much about the difference, or observed at least some difference in the way that he made work in both places. So it's the question is, I guess, more about how do you reconcile that within the work that you make, and how does it impact where you show work, if it does or if it doesn't.
I think I would say for me, it depends on the subject matter. Um, First off, it's not something I've given a thought. Whether how the impact. I just know that so far the works that I've shown, the feedback that I get whenever, especially when I'm there, because another thing is to show the work outside. But how many times are you there to see the work? I think I wish I said to my project the other day. I mean, this is me having a conversation in my head that you have traveled further than me, and I wish you could have your own passport. It'll have been stamped more than myself. Actually, it's gone so many places, and of course. For me as a Nigerian, traveling on the Nigerian passport is hard. So it's not. I think recently I was supposed to be in France for the first time ever. I got a rejection. It came as a shock because I had everything. I'd done everything and I have a good travel history, and for whatever reason, I didn't get that approved. So it's not every time I get to, and also sometimes some people are organizing events and they don't have budget to bring you over, and obviously I'm not going to bring my money to to go and see my exhibition, so it's just a few times that I've been in a space where my work is shown internationally, and then you stay and you have conversation. And I think I would say that if I'm thinking about your question now, I have had the same type of genuine interest in the work as I've gotten at home. Actually, it's been positive feedback. It's also the same question of we didn't know this was happening. We didn't know this was happening. And then I would say my project, one thing I really love about the work and what it has showed me, and not just this project, is the fact that we're all connected as human beings. We all go through the same thing, whether you're in London or you're in South Korea. We all go through different things, but then it manifests differently. So if you talk about the issues of mental health, they probably don't have, they used to have witchcraft accusations in Europe, in America too, but now that has been phased out. The killings of women who were accused of witchcraft. But then you see that some of the societal issues we have, they manifest in different forms. So when you have conversations with people who are genuinely engaging your work, you realize we all go through the same thing. So they can connect it from a personal level. So one woman is telling you about the atrocity. Maybe she has been a victim of DV. So she can relate to stories of people who are being through domestic violence in Nigeria. Maybe the only difference is that the woman in France who was being through domestic violence, there are systems in place that can protect her, unlike in Nigeria where the society is largely favors men. So sometimes DV, when you take it to the police, is seen as a house issue. So take it to the house and settle with your husband. So one thing I would say is I've seen the same feedback, the same shall I say, connection to the work, because we might live in different continents, we might live in different countries, we might come from different home and different experiences, but we're all connected. It's just that life happens to us differently. But when you look at it in depthly, you see it's all the same. It's all the same. It just happens differently.
I think about this question made me think about Fela Kuti's biography written by Carlos Moore, and I was really interested in the fact that he became really radicalized outside of Nigeria. So it was his visit to the U.S. And meeting this woman Sandra, in particular, that sort of informed his like Pan-African and also like political radicalism. And I found it like quite similar. Like going to university in the US was the first time I met Africans from across the continent. So I have friends from Sudan, Botswana, South Africa, and I was able to learn about how interconnected our stories are. And that's something that I didn't get when I was living in Nigeria. And so for me, the most exciting part about showing work outside of the country is actually connecting with people of African descent and the diaspora out there, which is really, really, really cool. I think the thing about showing work outside is worries about distortion, misunderstanding, fetishization. But I feel like it's worth it, because then like someone from Guadeloupe, I remember, came and saw some of my work at Manifold exhibition in London, and um, he literally started crying. He was like, "This reminds me of like my upbringing," even though it was images from Lagos, Nigeria, and that blew my mind because I thought that my work was very specific to a time and place, but it was actually speaking to something larger, like across the Atlantic. So those sort of dialogues are like exciting for me when showing work outside of the country. But I think showing work in here, you're able to start discussions at like a higher level because of like a shared sort of understanding of our environment. So a great career has a mix of both, I think.
I love that.
Like something that I've like noticed like when I've been showing like work like yeah like in, for example like in London or like other European cities so it's like a lot of times like the work would be like digested or viewed like primarily like through a lens of like identity or race or like even though like all these things like play into the work but like there's kind of like a hunger like for that or like almost like a fetish for that sometimes like even like during like history month or so like sometimes like that's the month where I get like 3 4 shows and then like the rest of the year like I don't get up but like when I'm like talking to or showing like my work like to people of like African heritage, I get to like talk more about like the nuances like in my work. Like I get to talk about like materials because like there's not like that fetish for that like or like because you're from this heritage or that like you have to make this work like just about that and like that's the only thing like we're interested in. So like yeah, I'm just but I'm also thinking like even if the majority of people like yeah just want to see the work like through that lens, like there's always like everywhere in the world like most times like even if it's just 1 or 2 people like that see the work and like that generally like are interested like in the work or like kind of like reflect like on on the art piece and like think about their own stories that relate to it, like that already makes it like worth it still to show in these places and like that there's still like the connection like that I make with people through the work that's yeah that makes it worth it like whatever I'm showing. Yeah.
Thank you. I have another question, but I wanted to check if there's any questions in the audience before I wrap with my final one. I think it'd be nice if there was at least one. Oh, a microphone's coming.
Should I stand up or sit down?
Sorry?
Hello, everyone. Giant Jumbo Penta, based in Benin City, Nigeria. And first of all, it's not a question actually. I would like to say that I really enjoyed the way you guys have spoken so far. And forgive me, I would like to know your name again. Sorry.
Etiosa.
Etiosa.
Yes.
And what about you?
Olukemi.
Olukemi. First of all, Etiosa, what you said about informing people about the art ecosystem right from the school level, the university, and everything. I think it was a great point, and I could resonate with that because when I was in art school in Lagos, I didn't have any idea how the art industry worked. All we did were assignments, and assignment after assignment, project after project, and lecturers would come, they would check it out. We didn't know why we were actually doing what we were doing, even though we were actually getting better. And most people didn't understand the business of art and the structure of art aside art school. And that's why if you look at the space now, you barely have people who have studied in the space because they really don't understand how it is. And when you talk about enlightening people from the school system, I share with you on that because I've been opportune to accept interns from Delsu, Delta State University, from Uniben, and Auchi Polytechnic. They've come to my studio and I took them. And I see that there's a whole lot of gap and some things I had to learn on my own, even after leaving uni in like 2014 or so. There were things I had to learn that I didn't learn in school. And I had to teach these people and realize that they had a lot, to get to. And when you said that, I was, in support of it. And I wish it's something that should continue while they are still in the system so that before they leave there, they'll be fully prepared for the world and the challenges that because most of them end up just living their whole life doing commissions and not get to play a part in the main role. They just end up doing commissions and think doing commissions is where it all ends. And that's basically what it is. And artists that are here currently, people like yourself, people like, myself and other artists who work here or work outside Benin City or outside Nigeria can come together and see how they can start a project, to get with these people, basically. And for you,
Kemi, my other name is Adeswa.
Adeswa, cool, fresh. I have a friend.
My mom is Adu.
Okay, nice, that's cool. I have a friend Adeswa. She models for me too. Yeah. So what you said about documenting history now, I had a conversation with someone a long time ago that most of these bronzes, most of these works, in Europe and other parts of the world, even the ones we still have here, were purely documentations of the life at the time. And because of the practice that was here then, as a sculptor in the guild, you don't come out and sculpt your own idea. The Oba literally commissions you. Like, for example, the door at Holy Cross Arosa Cathedral, that door was commissioned by Oba, is it Akenzua? He basically described what he wanted. So most of this bronze work are actually the Oba's idea, the king's idea, revelation, and things that documented. In our own time, it's beyond bronze now. Photography, painting, textile, town dye, film. I think people should concentrate more on what's going on now. And I told somebody, there are bronze sculptures of Obaewari on the horse. What about this Obaewari II on the Rolls Royce? We are not having, it's the time now. We're not having, so when you said that, that's what's up. And I feel we should key into that as well and see how we can also document now, because in the next 100 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think the internet is extremely powerful. Like a well-produced, like people don't realize when you have an exhibition, it's up and then it goes. The thing that lasts are the images.
True that.
And if you have a video, and if MOWAA can have really good, even make like documentaries about artists now and put it on YouTube, do you know what that can do for people's career? Like building, exactly, and also supporting, sorry, I'm answering that last question, but also supporting people to like make websites, I think is critical, because it's like the shop front for an artist. I mean, shop front is the wrong word, but like it's the portfolio. And I think, things like that to sort of allow the incredible talent that is here to be accessed globally and understood globally.
When you mentioned website, I was speaking to someone on Saturday, and he was saying, I think it was Saturday or Sunday, my last day at Ardex, and he was mentioning all these things. And we talked, and I was like, okay, do you have a website? Like, no, I use Instagram. So I said, number 1 to 10 thing I want to tell you is get a website, get a website, get a website, get a website, get a website. Instagram is lovely, but if Zuckerberg says, I'm checking out today, I'm done, where is your work? Where can I see your work? It's, it's beyond you, actually. It's part of it, something that, and these are the kind of things that MOWAA can do. Like he mentioned, the business of art, the packaging, like we say in Nigerian lingua, the packaging that comes to being an artist, not just saying, I have an Instagram profile, I have 1 million followers. Lovely stuff, good stuff, but it's still not your platform, actually. So all of these little things that they don't pay attention to are some of the things that I believe that MOWAA can do to really prepare artists for the world, to prepare them for the world beyond Nigeria, beyond Edo State. Sorry, we had to take you back, but this is this is lovely conversation, actually.
No, it was a very lovely conversation. Thank you for the contribution, because, it's really re-solidifying what I think our mission will be education and skills building has been very much at the forefront of what we're thinking, but also, yeah, directly trying to understand what the art schools are not doing, but also if people aren't going to art school, even what can we do in terms of courses, workshops, exchanges, skill sharing, etc. Because that's very important. And if we're committed to artists, we need to be committed to their development because, yeah, it's not just about the artists of yesterday, it's very much about the artists of tomorrow. So now we have a number of different things to do. Turns out we have a film production company and a publishing company as well as all the university, but it's okay. But I mean, in many ways, I think what we also want to do is also not be this sort of, I don't know, all-encompassing behemoth of an institution. Like we want to empower other initiatives, other projects, so that they can also be part of a network that can do some of this work as well. So I think that's been very good feedback. I don't know if there's any other questions or comments from the audience. Otherwise, I will move to my last question. The title of this talk was Emerging Legacy, and I think we talked about a number of different things. I wanted to ask what you would like to be your legacy as artists. Maybe you don't think about that, but maybe in a smaller or a shorter way, if that's not how you think about it, what would you like the students or the artists of tomorrow to think or learn about your work or catalyze in themselves when they come across it?
I mean, I think for me, I keep evolving. So I feel like I might give an answer today, and maybe 10 years' time, I come across the video, I'm like, ah, that's what I was thinking on the 5th of November.
That's still
My
okay,
thoughts
though.
have
That's good.
changed. My thoughts might change, but at this moment, at this time, um, one thing I know that my legacy would be November 5, I say this, I don't know if it will change, but it would surely be more focusing more on community building. Community in terms of not just artists, but the people that I work with. I want to always make sure my art is as participatory as possible. It's one of the shock for me when I started photography and I started to go, I'll go to Lagos and I'll go for exhibitions and stuff. I did feel like art can be somehow elitist. It's very like this. It's very people of a certain, level, intellect, exposure, education, background. And even when you're trying to navigate these spaces, there's this, you're not from here, you're not among us, you don't have the things we have. So for me, I think art is, you know, when I study theater arts, and it's so sad, it's something like you mentioned. The things that they will teach us is more about European art, Sanskrit, drama, all of these things. We didn't learn so much African art at the time. Art has always been a part of us. Art is nothing new. The documentations, all of these things, the Benin bronzes, the econ monoliths, all of these things reveal that we have always, art has been a fabric of our history. It's embedded in our DNA. So making sure that, and now with religion, is because I grew up in a Pentecostal church, I know that the way that I see art, the way I'm talking about art, it's different from the way I used to think when I was very active in a Pentecostal church, because there is a demonization of art by some of these Pentecostal churches. Growing up, my father would throw some of our art away because he started to go to a church where they say, oh, there's demon in this world. So when you're praying, maybe, and then for us as children, you imagine that maybe the eye is blinking or maybe you're feeling sleepy. And then you start to imagine things. So now, making that conscious effort to let people to start to accept art. It's so funny. The church I used to attend, the pastor who really demonized art, his wife is a PhD holder from one of the universities in UK, and she's a fine artist. But he made my parents hate art so much. So trying to build that consciousness in people is something I want to do. And when I say people of all levels, whether it's children, and that's why I want to make my work as accessible as possible for people of all ages, all literacy levels. So it doesn't mean that only when you go to school. And that's why I mentioned that during my exhibition, I knew that people cannot leave the market to come to this space. So can I take the art to them? And then we do a drama performance on the market day. So having this type of thought where every form of, different levels of people, different types of people can engage with my art is something I really want to do. It's a legacy. I've told myself, I loved what I did last year. It was impactful. I want to continue to replicate this model. possible, where necessary in my work. So I want to be able to let people know the transformative power of art, to appreciate art better, using it as even as a tool for education, as a tool for advocacy, whatever it is that I'm touching on, because I'm always doing work that is advocating anyway. But regardless of the subject matter, demystifying art, because I speak as someone who came from a Pentecostal background, knowing that there is this pushback about art, about whether it's sculpting or painting, and bringing it back and making us understand that we're just going back to who we were before. That's definitely something I want to do for my legacy. On this day, November 5, I don't know if it will change.
It's been recorded so we can look back at it.
Well, my legacy should be, I don't know, for now, right now, like my short answer would be like just being able to like express myself like freely and like be able to like tell my story and like leave my small like footprint like within the history of time and like being able to like extend my hand to others to like do the same like and like share my resources and my knowledge to like help them along the way because like yeah oftentimes like I don't know, people feel like alone and not able to like navigate like this like art world, but like I don't know, like we all have like a bit of knowledge and contribute and like help out like where we can. So like why shouldn't we?
I think I don't really know what my legacy will be. I'm allowing it to unfold. But I think if there's one thing or if there's a characteristic I hope that can be associated with me after my time on earth is over would be one of bravery. I think that we live in a very absurd society and it's very difficult for people to speak up. The legacy of corporal punishment is a big part of that. But also I'm still thinking about like the PTSD of like NSAS, for example, and how like young people are not encouraged. I mean, especially as a Yoruba person, like to speak up is quite difficult. And so I think I just hope to be remembered as someone that spoke up in the ways that I felt compelled to and hopefully inspire others to do the same.
Thank you. That's a lovely way to end. Thank you so much to Cameron, Olukemi, and Etinosa. Can everyone please join me in a round of applause for our lovely panel?